Rudolf Steiner. The causes and intellectual background of the First World War. What had in principle been foreseeable for a long time, now, as a result of various recent events, has apparently suddenly burst upon the world, since occult factors were also involved. GA 174a. We have thus witnessed important events, the deeper meaning and significance of which will only be fully understood later. And much of what lies behind these fateful events is still completely unexplained today. For many years we have been trying to deepen our spiritual knowledge, but now we are, in a sense, facing a real test, the test of whether, despite all the difficulties of the present age, we are capable of holding fast to the great ideals which the spiritual world has set before us. We are not a society that embraces homogeneous groups of people, but we are trying to extend the spirit of reconciliation to the whole world. That is why we are being put to a certain test, because at this time it is extremely difficult to judge things objectively, truthfully and fairly. Lately, there have been different voices from across the Rhine, talk of German barbarism and the like, and the most hateful accusations and slanders against us. Even the most respected French intellectuals have stirred up hatred among the people. And in this case we must also consider the personal as a symptom, a characteristic symptom. It is all the sadder that Maurice Maeterlinck was one of those who attacked Germanism and the German spirit with the most vehemence and hatred. But Maurice Maeterlinck would be nowhere without Novalis. Great things are happening today, very great things. And only in the future will we be able to draw on the great events of the past to understand the events of our time, in the sense that certain things are happening again. Many things have to come together for something to happen again, for significant historical events to be repeated, so to speak. Just as once, in the heyday of Greco-Latin culture, the Romans had to fight the Punic Wars against Carthage, just as the famous Battle of Mila decided the fate of the Romans, 260 BC, who managed to defend a flourishing Greco-Roman culture against the declining forces of the still seemingly strong Carthaginian Empire, so too we see a kind of repetition of certain events at the origin of the current war. We can say this here and now. A remarkable battle took place between the Romans and the Carthaginians. The Carthaginians, with their huge fleet, had a huge naval superiority over the Romans, who could only achieve a great victory by the unusual idea of tying their ships together with wide gangways, thus turning the sea battle into an almost land battle in which they had the upper hand. Few would have thought it unheard of in those days, but now something similar happened at Liège, Belgium, the first great battle of the First World War, which has a certain connection with these events and will be remembered as a key event for a long time to come. I mention these things only because I want to draw attention to the significance of what happened today. The reason I can talk about these things the way I'm going to talk about them is because in a sense my karma has prepared me for it. I was born in an empire that is said to have played a very great role in warfare between peoples. But as an adult, I find that even as a child I was part of the class of being a homeless person. My childhood fell at a time when German hatred was still being felt in Austria, when Austria was still under the influence of the Prussian victory, when even the Germans in Austria hated the Germans in the Reich. I have no reason to be prejudiced against Germany. It is this very unpatriotism, which has given me the right, through my karma, to speak objectively and in the spirit of anthroposophy about these things. It is not appropriate to make predictions, so today we leave unanswered the question of who will ultimately win, as it is very much in doubt. But a victory of sorts was won even before the outbreak of the war, an important victory which is linked to our spiritual quest and which will leave an indelible mark for all time. What kind of victory is this? Has the center of Europe not long been linked to the east of the continent? And we are not talking about the people of Eastern Europe. You can find out a lot about these people in the lecture cycle The Mission of the Individual Spirits of the People. We have to distinguish between the people of Eastern Europe and the three good guys who are now at the head of this people in opposition to German spirituality, Tsarism, Russian militarism and false Pan-Slavism. There were certain threads that connected the heart of Europe, Germany and Austria, and Tsarist Russia. But with the declaration of war of July 31, 1914, this thread between the German and Austrian leaderships and the Tsarist court was swept aside and severed. It was a great victory, presumably, for the Western powers. There are important features of world history in this, and the events between Central Europe, the Western powers and Russia at that time should certainly give us pause for thought. If we want to be fair and correct in our anthroposophical judgments, we cannot overlook the unnatural alliance between Western and Northwestern Europe, France and England, and Eastern Europe, Russia. When I was in a debate with Mrs. Annie Besant, president of the Theosophical Society, it was an Indian scholar who said that the way Mrs. Besant at that time was like shouting at a man who is about to have his hand cut off and who protests against it, be tolerant, otherwise you are stirring up strife. The same thing has often been said in recent weeks, that Austria would have been peace-loving if it had not gone to war with Serbia. It's like shouting at someone whose hand is about to be cut off, be peace-loving. Today, there are many opportunities for us to gain objectivity through the painful events around us. But to do this, we must learn to think correctly. This is also the task of anthroposophy.